Welcome back to the Print on Demand cast. In this episode, we're getting into things you don't know about printing on fabric. So let's get into it.
Radical! Welcome to this week's episode of the Print on Demand cast. Each week, join the gnarly Travis and Josiah as they provide insight into the print on demand industry and equip you with the totally tubular tools, advice, and strategies you need to achieve success and hopefully have a few laughs along the way. Now on to this week's Totally Tubular show.
Welcome back, Pod Pals. It is great to have you with us again for another episode of the Print on Demand cast, talking about maybe things you didn't know about printing on fabric. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But before we do, as always, I have to introduce my co-host, my cohort, my co-pilot, my co-captain, Travis Ross, all the way from Make Your Mark Design. How are things in your neck of the woods, sir? How was your week so far?
Week so far has been good. Yeah, just kind of a low-key week so far. It's Tuesdays we record this. We just switched to a different podcast host.
Yes, we did. Which, by the way, before you continue, I just have to say, I'm going to kind of hop in here real quick. For those of you on this topic, our videos will no longer be available on Spotify. So if you are one of the people who watch this on Spotify, our videos of the video episodes are going to exclusively be at printondemandcast.com/YouTube. So if you've gotten in the habit of watching us on the go or on video form, it's only going to be on YouTube. So with that being said, I pass the baton back to you. Tell us about your week in transferring us to this new platform.
Right. Well, to be clear, we still will be on Spotify. It'll just be audio only.
Correct.
And we'll also be on a few other new platforms that
shiny.
If you probably don't care, because if you were on those platforms,
you have your platform.
You hadn't found us yet. So
yes.
But yeah, so it has like this kind of migration tool or something, and it's like, we're gonna migrate all your stuff over, and it got through it, and it was like, yay, we did it. We transferred 140 something episodes, and I'm like, I have 182. And so it imported all of those, but it didn't import any of the audio. And so if you by chance you might have been searching in one of those 30 some or 40 some episodes this last week, you may have not gotten anything when you pressed play, but I think we've got it all fixed. It was kind of a pain in the tushy, to be honest.
Yes.
But through pain and hard work and blood, sweat, and tears, I'll do anything for my Print on Demand cast family, and it's proven by what I did with this new host. But while I was doing this, I would, I had to download episodes and then re-upload them and do all these things, and it was crazy. And so a lot of, occasionally one would be playing in the background while I was manipulating some, and I heard a few of our old dad jokes that, had been on the podcast in the past. And it was funny because sometimes I'd be like, no, what did he say? And I'd go back, but I found out that we have had some really bad dad jokes, not by us. It's all from our guests. And I
won't name them for anonymity's sake. But
I don't want to name them, but there have been some horrible dad jokes. I mean, just a few. It's not like everybody has terrible ones. I mean, and we do, to be fair, we do put them on the spot. But one of the ones that I heard, it was, he said, what is brown and sticky? And Josiah was like, I don't know. I've never heard that phrase. And it's like, it's a stick, Josiah. It's a stick. Anyway, that was my yesterday and a little bit of Sunday and a lot of today. just doing stuff like that.
My God.
How was you're transitioning jobs right now, aren't you?
Yeah. So yesterday was my first official job, or official day, I should say, on the new job. And it's been, it's in the same industry that I've been in, which is senior living and senior living communities. And so my father-in-law, Jason, who's been on the podcast before, he is out of town. And so I'm kind of running point on 3 of his clients, and it's my second day. So thankfully I've had experience doing what he's needing me to do in the last year or so of my experience, but it is very much like baptism by fire. I had to do a last minute, show or tour today with a family. Basically, my job is kind of like real estate, but for older folks that are needing senior living communities. So we meet, show them the property, show them the house or the apartments or whatever. So it's been a fiery start, man, and kind of, thrown into the fire, but that's how I learned best. And it's been great. And so, my experience in the industry prior to this is definitely helping. So it kind of goes to show that, cool. And we've even talked about this before. Sometimes you find yourselves in these seasons or jobs or occupations where you're like, I don't know why I'm here. And then the next opportunity comes along and you're like, oh, I learned all of this, or, oh, this skill set is what I needed or what I developed in the previous job or previous or whatever. So, it's been great. It's been busy 2 days, and we had a great meeting in Greeley last week with a contact of a production shop here in Colorado, in Greeley, and lots of exciting things that could stem from that particular conversation. So I'm super excited about that. But all around, decent couple of days, and excited to be sitting down and cranking out a brand new episode.
I just have one, question for you. It's just now that you're in a new job, I don't know if perhaps you guys need any t-shirts or, garments or anything like that I could provide for you. I do know a thing or two about, branded apparel. And you think you're good?
No, we definitely need that. There's a whole thing that I plan on presenting to owners and just being like, hey, here's some.
Well, I know a guy.
I know. And a lot of it is also like drinkware, it's just nice to carry some branded stuff, even if, this is an offline conversation because someone from the company might listen to this. So we'll talk offline about what needs to be done and what doesn't. So, all that to be said, we know a guy. If you need to build an ark, I also know a guy. But he's not living. So that was a bad pun.
Speaking of dad jokes.
Yeah, exactly. It was an unintentional segue to this week's weekly dad joke.
Time for the weekly dad joke.
All right, Travis, what do you have for us this week on the weekly dad joke?
Well, late last week, I was actually kicked out of my coffee club. It's like a
You're
weekly
in a coffee
thing.
Club?
Yeah.
This is news.
I was kind of frustrated because they kicked me out because I wore a T-shirt.
That's TEA for those of you that are wondering why the hell someone would kick someone out for wearing a T-shirt.
But it's on brand.
TEA.
It's an on brand.
Yeah, it's great. Oh,
joke.
yeah. We had to use it. It translates very well into our main event, of course, about printing on fabric and the things that you might not know, dear listener, about printing on fabric. So with that being said, we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of this week's main event.
Main event, 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 main event.
Listen, if you're not watching on YouTube, if you're like, why would I watch on YouTube? Why would I ever take the time to watch this on YouTube? The bumpers. That's case in point. I mean, you don't have to look at me and my mug or Travis's long hair and his mug and my tattoo. Just for the bumpers, watch on YouTube, really. So, okay, this week's main event. Actually, I forgot. It's been so long since we've shouted out a review on the show that I completely spaced. I knew in the back of my mind I was forgetting something. But listen, we have a review to shout out, and there's some context behind this because we found out recently, Travis, that it seems like Apple, I don't know, is suppressing the right word When it comes to reviews, I mean, technology platforms I'm suppressing never go together. But in this case, there's an outlier, and yeah, they do. So, Travis, you made a discovery recently about some reviews that maybe Apple wasn't actually putting on their platform. Explain kind of what the process was behind discovering this, and then we'll shout out the review.
I honestly have no idea. I was on this other this app basically that was like, pull back the curtain, an app that would help you get reviews from, more people. And so I was looking at this, and you put your stuff in, and it shows your most recent reviews. And I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, I don't see this on our page, and then I look, and it said you have like 68, reviews or something, like people rated it. I guess only some people actually write a review, but and then on our Apple page, it says we have like 45 or something. And I'm like, wow, that's a big difference. And so I started going through and just matching what I saw on the site to what I was seeing in this app. And there were like 4 or 5 or 6 written reviews that are not on our Apple page that we never saw. So if you wrote a review and you never got shouted out, first of all, I apologize. Second of all, blame Apple. And one of the reviews was actually from Fiona, all the way in Australia. She was actually on our show back a while. And I don't know why Apple chooses to allow some reviews to go through and some not to. But now that we have this, I don't know how this other app gets those either. That's the thing. So
right, like what kind of information do they have?
Right. It's so weird. Or maybe it's just, I don't know if they're based in another country and they have a different subset of, maybe in the UK, we have a lot more reviews. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre to me.
Yeah. We're really popular in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Who knows? Awesome. Yeah. So to that end, we do have a review to shout out, and we want to certainly give this person their flowers, as it were, and let them out for the review. A review that happened in January 16th of 2024. 5 stars, obviously. I mean, it's never expected, but I'm not surprised. It says, amazing POD show. This is the first time I'm ever writing a review for a podcast, and I can truly say that Travis and Josiah are an amazing wealth of knowledge and hugely inspiring. I look forward to their podcast each week, always learning something new and coming away feeling that I can make a success of my POD business. I find their guests very inspiring and informative as well. Thanks so much for an amazing show. Sarah Dan 8. Well, Sarah Dan 8, thank you for taking the time to write a review. And again, we apologize that it's been this long since we discovered that you wrote that review, but it's always awesome to hear from folks that are enjoying the show, and I'm glad that you find what we're doing beneficial, because that's the goal. That's the point, is to provide great information, tips, tools, and education for you to be a success in your POD business. And yes, you can be a success in your pod business, and we're excited to see what that looks like for you. So, Sarah, anything, or Travis, anything for Sarah Dan 8 before we move on from the review?
I think you said it all. Sarah, hit us up. Via email.
Yeah,
if you,
for sure.
Want some help getting your pod business on track. So yeah. And I don't know if we're going to shout out the older ones. I mean, there's some in there from like 2020, 2021. And it just seems like that ship has sailed.
Well, we were
to those listeners. I know.
I mean, maybe it would help offline. It would help you and I know that we were doing a decent job at the beginning from the garage of Jason's house, AKA my office at the time. But we'll see. Next week, I will say, I'll tease this. Next week, we have a review that we will shout out. That is hands down the funniest / most aggressive review that I've ever laid my eyes on for this podcast. And I'm super excited to share it with you guys. So tune in next week, episode 184. We will shout that out. It's going to be awesome. So, okay, so main event time. I won't play the bumper again, even though I enjoy watching the cast of the West Side Story snap off beat to our bumper. So, things you didn't know about printing on fabric. So, this kind of spurred from an experience that you had recently, Travis, and you thought maybe we should talk about it on the show. So catch us all up before we kind of dive into the specifics.
Sure. So I have a second Amazon account that it's kind of always been on the side. I got it several years ago and had some plans for it, and then those plans kind of faltered. And recently, I've just been loading some additional products on there using Gear Bubble specifically, which is a print-on-demand vendor, like a fulfillment vendor. And so it's all automated, but we're loading, a couple thousand products up there a week. And I sold a T-shirt on that account. I mean, I've sold some T-shirts, I've sold some mugs, we've done a bunch of different things, but this was specifically a T-shirt, but it got returned. And so when it got returned, the return address is actually my house. And so I opened it up and I knew what it was. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a really nice shirt. It's a Next Level 3600. I had chosen the premium. They just give you a regular T-shirt or a unisex T-shirt or a premium. And those are the only options you have at Gear Bubble. You don't know what exactly it is. So I got it back and I was like, this is a Next Level 3600, which is a nice, 100% ring spun garment, but the print was DTF. And I had no idea that it would be DTF. And DTF, for those of you who don't know, is direct to film. It's a particular type of print that you can apply to a shirt. And we're going to talk about all of that. So I had no idea that it was going to be DTF. And yes, I do know what you are saying because we preach it all the time. I did not get a sample.
So you get nothing.
Well, got a return. So it got me thinking about, first of all, of course, you need to get samples from your vendors. But then I was also thinking, like, many of our audience potentially may not know the different options and the limitations of those different print methods, and like what are the pros and the cons and all of that, and how many different are there to print on, fabrics or garments, and because you say garments, but you can also print on pillows and tea towels and onesies. There's all kinds of different things that you can use these print methods to print on. So I wanted to go through some of the kind of the usual suspects for printing on garments or fabric, and do some like pros and cons, just so you guys are aware what those limitations are, and you have good questions to ask your potential vendors when you're saying, hey, what is the print process on this? You'll understand it. And it also might help you say, hey, I want to bring a certain part of my business in-house and outsource other parts. And so this might give you some insight in what you might want to actually bring in-house. So that's the impetus for the show.
Nice. And you didn't necessarily get any samples, but we did get an entire episode out of that experience to then pass on the information to our listeners, which is really what we're doing, folks, is telling you, hey, here's a pitfall or a pothole that we fell into one time. Don't do that.
Right.
So, okay. So, of course, okay. So we're going to break down some printing methods and break down some pros and cons for each. Now, DTG is the first one we're going to cover, and that stands for direct to garment. That is something that Travis and I are both very familiar with because that was the primary print method that we used when we had our own shops and we were doing production. So some pros, the DTG process can print photorealistic images. And it's been around for a while, so support is easy to find, and it's a fairly nice hand, right? So when we say hand, can kind of explain what hand means. If you were to be at a conference or a trade show, you might hear the word hand thrown around a little bit. But hand is basically the feel of the garment and the feel of the print on the garment, what it feels like, what your hand feels when you touch the finished product. And so that's kind of a way to accurately also let your end user know, your customer know what they can expect in terms of the hand of the product. So it is fairly nice. It kind of maintains or kind of the feel of the original garment translates well after the print process. There's not a huge change to that.
Yeah. I think of all of the processes that we're going to talk about, I would say that this is probably third on like the best hand,
Sure.
For the garment. So it does feel nice. I'm actually wearing a DTG shirt right now, and you can feel the ink, you can feel where it is, but it's not like
a sticker or like a
it's not like a sticker.
heavy.
Yeah. It does breathe some. So, and those, you kind of blazed over it, but DTG is literally like a photo printer for a garment. So it can do a full on picture. There were so many times at our business that people would come in and they'd want to do like memorial shirts, and they'd want to put the person's face, on there. And that's not as easy to do with some of the other methods, but with DTG, it gets skin tones right. It looks really, really nice. And like you said, it's been around for several years, and there's tons of Facebook groups out there. So I see, I'm in a lot of them. I see people saying, hey, this is what I'm getting. What should I be doing? What are some options? And so people always answer those questions. And there's just a lot of support that can be found right now in the DTG world.
Yeah. And
what are some of the cons?
Some negatives here. Only natural fibers. And this is something that I ran into a lot. I was because tri-blends are like the trendy thing, or things that are a mixed blend or people are looking for. But with DTG, the more cotton that is present in the blend, the better that print is going to turn out. So 100% cotton is going to look great. The more you go and delineate or kind of degrade from 100%, it's a crapshoot. So we would print some tri-blends because that's what people wanted, but having to let them know that it's not going to be the best quality. So it has to be cotton dominant for it to really look pristine. So 100% polyester, sports fit, Under Armour, that kind of
not going to work.
It's not going to work. If the ink sticks at all, it's going to be awful. Now there are some pre-treats that are said to be good with poly-dominant garments, but again, it's kind of a crapshoot. You can't really guarantee the quality of what's actually going to come out. And when you're talking about a heat press, because you have to cure the pre-treat, which is the next con. You have to pre-treat the shirt, the garment, whatever that is, so the ink will adhere to that garment. Now, polyester can scorch, aka burn, much quicker than, or much easier, I should say, than a cotton dominant garment. So you're going to have to it's a really different workflow when it comes to heat setups or heat, presets. When it comes for your curing processes, it's completely different. Because what works with cotton will not work with pre-treat or with poly.
Yeah, we didn't write this down, but definitely a con is all the different recipes, that come with DTG, because any part of the process that you change can throw something off. So even, down to like the garment itself, you could have two 100% cotton red XL t-shirts from different vendors. And, you have a Hanes and you have a Gildan or whatever, you have a Bella, whatever. And they might all look different at the end because they're different garments. And so, and it's based, if you put too much pre-treat on, too little pre-treat on, you put too much ink on, too little ink on, you heat it, you cure it too hot, too cold. I mean, there's all of these different recipes that you really, that's a huge con. Now, go ahead. Because it's been around so long, there's a lot of help, but it's going to be even location based dependent. So in Colorado, it's very dry, and these machines really run better in humidity. So we had to humidify our entire shop, which is really hard in Colorado winters, but we had to continue to fill them. But you do it in Florida, you don't need anything, so just every little piece, even into the environment, can throw a wrench in the whole system.
Yeah, I remember being at a trade show. You might have been with me, or maybe it was Jason at one of these shows. But we were talking to one of the salesmen, and we were like, hey, man, what's the, humidification process? Because we know, obviously, humidity is a huge part. And he's like, oh, dude, all I do is, I throw a plant next to mine. I don't even have a humidifier. And it turns out this cat lived in, Florida, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's cool, dude. If I put a ficus next to my brother, whatever machine, it's not going to do anything for me. And to Travis's point, we had kind of like a DTG Bible, for lack of a better term, where it was like, okay, Hanes 18,000, you do this. If it's a Just Hoods, you're going to do this, because every brand was different, because no two brands really are the same garment, right? Even though at face value it's like, well, that's a black hoodie and it's 100% cotton. It's going to print differently when it comes to DTG. Another thing to keep in mind too is there's what's known as the DTG box, right? And that depends on your curing process. Now, when we finally got a tunnel dryer, the DTG box wasn't as big of an issue. But when you're using a heat press, what you'll find is, because you are pre-treating the garment for the ink to stick, you have to cure the pre-treat, which means it's a pre-treat, and then you put the heat press down to kind of
basically you're drying it.
Yeah, you're drying it to bond the pre-treat to the fabric. And that's going to produce a box that is the outline of the heat press that you used. What that translates to is a lot of customer service questions about, hey, why does my design have a box around it? We ended up putting a card in each order that said, hey, you might notice there's a box, whatever, discolor it. Once you wash it, it'll go away. So that's just some more like customer service stuff where you kind of have to kind of preemptively anticipate, and educate the customer on that. So that's another con. And then again, depending on the machine, ink can be pretty expensive, which is something, again, that Travis, you and I know very well when it comes to DTG machines.
Yeah. A lot of the cartridge-based systems, like the F2100 by Epson that we both started out with, they're cartridge-based. So, and those cartridges were expensive, like $220, $230 for the white. And you'd go through white because you're laying white down underneath the color every single print. And you'd go through white like crazy. So luckily we ended up, getting into a bulk ink system where it was like less than 50%. It was more than 50% less. Cut it more than in half when we moved to those newer printers and they also were faster, et cetera, et cetera. So lot of pros to DTG, a lot of cons though, particularly if you're going to do it yourself, you just got to know what you're doing. But most of what you're experiencing, if you're selling t-shirts and garments online, through the Printifys and the Printfuls, most of what your customers are getting is going to be DTG, because that's kind of the print on demand king for garments. Although we'll talk about DTF in a little bit. It is really excelling, I guess, or its market penetration is increasing. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we get into that, let's talk about kind of the granddaddy of them all, screen printing. Or silk screening. You might have heard that if you're older.
Those are the two terms that are interchangeable. So listen, screen printing, to Travis's point, is kind of the OG of the printing processes. So number one, super inexpensive for bulk orders. And really so that's why when you talk to screen print shops, they're going to ask you for an MOQ, or minimum order quantity. One, that's on for their benefit, but also the more you order from, or the more you get from a screen print shop, the lesser it's going to be. And two, again, extremely soft hand. Travis, you said the DTG was number 3 in this kind of like feel category. I'm assuming, we haven't talked, but screen printing, is that at the top of that list in terms of the feel of the garment? Number 2. Okay.
I think it's number 2. I think you'll agree when we get there. You'll go, oh yeah. But no, I think it's number 2. It really does. And it depends. Like a water-based screen print is a lot nicer hand than like the DuPont inks that they use, like just their regular inks. Those, the Plastisol, those have a heavier hand, but you get some water-based stuff and it feels like you can't necessarily tell where the print starts and stops, when you're rubbing your hand against it. It's pretty nice. So that is definitely a pro with screen printing. Some of the cons are that it's really, really labor intensive, because the way it's done is that you have to set up a screen for each color. So that's why you're always asked, well, how many colors are in the job? And you're like, I don't know. I just want this thing printed. And you got to go, okay, there's that color, that color, that color. And then almost all the time when I would ask that question, I would ask that question just to see if we might want to outsource this job to a screen printer. But a lot of times they'd go, it's 3, and I'd look at it and be like, nope, you forgot the white, or you forgot the black or whatever, because they're not programmed to think about what colors are in their designs. But regardless, you have to set up a screen for each one of those. And unless you have an automatic press that does it automatically, you got to pull a squeegee for every color times every shirt in that order. So it's a lot more labor intensive. And because you're limited, you're not necessarily limited on colors, but every color you do is going to they have to do a new screen. And so, and it's more pulls of that squeegee. So it's going to cost more and more. So you want to try to get your colors down in a screen printing environment, but it's very difficult for them to do photorealistic images. Now, I've seen some amazing screen printers that have done a really great job, but those shirts are, they get pricey, because you have, you'll have 8, 10, 12 colors to get like the perfect skin tone on, I remember a guy that used to do like horror tees, and he'd have all this stuff, and he was selling a ton of them, and he went going through a screen printer, and it was like 12 color or 12 color screens that they had to do. And it was a lot. So if he wasn't selling so many, he definitely would have been in a DTG or DTF, option, because you just can't do that many. There's just too much labor, that's why they always have a minimum order quantity, like Josiah was saying.
It has to be worth them engaging this process. They're not going to do it for one, because it's just not economical at that point.
Sure.
So number 3 on this list, or letter C, depending on how you're following along with us at home, DTF, again, direct to film, not the cultural norm for DTF. It's another definition. The pros, it can go on nearly anything. I know in DTG you heard us say that it's cotton dominant. Screen printing, it can go on nearly anything as well. However, there's no MOQs on this DTF type of thing, because it's more of a transfer process. There's no pre-treatment that's needed, so you don't have to worry about the DTG box or pre-treating it beforehand. And it can be fairly inexpensive depending on what you're ordering and how many you're ordering for these film transfers, essentially.
Yeah, and when I say it can go on anything, I mean it. Like, you can get DTF on, you can put it on leather. So you could like literally put it on like a leather binder or a purse or a satchel or something. It can go on hard goods, which is super cool. Now you have to figure out how to heat it to where you want to damage the substrate, but yeah, it can go on poly. So you can do some of that moisture wicking, 100% poly, more athleisure stuff. That's what you're going to find when you go to a Nike store and you're looking for, yoga pants or whatever. You're going to find a DTF or a screen printed option on those. And I do feel like DTF is becoming more and more the norm for that stuff, because you don't have to produce a screen. It's all digital, and I can just print, on a 24 wide, or, I've seen, we talked a couple weeks ago after we got back for the Impressions show, that one printer, it was printing it, that had to have been 6 feet wide by Cobra Flex, their massive machine. And it was just, and so you think about how many little bitty Nike logos that go on the hem of your, your yoga pants. How many can you get with a machine like that? And then you just, have them automatically cut, or cut them, manually even. And then you've got, a line of heat presses, and boom, you're good to go. As opposed to making a screen and doing doing that. It's just a different process, but you get the idea. Some of the cons is that, like, the reason I think that shirt that was DTF was returned is because the hand, it does feel, when it's like a big, image, the hand is just bad. It just feels like plastic. So a lot of times you'll have a graphic, and it'll have black in it, and they're going to print it like on a black shirt. They'll use a rip software to knock all that black out. So that hand, so it's not just a big plastic thing right on your chest. and just you'll sweat. I mean, it literally feels like a sticker, like you were saying earlier. It's just thick and heavy, and it doesn't have a good hand. That's my biggest issue with it. And I think that's why someone returned this shirt. It was a wrestling shirt, and it had a lot of big text and had a big guy, in the middle wrestling, or two guys. And I was like, oh, that's why they returned this, because it just feels like it's gross. I don't know if I want to wear that. The shirt's great, but the hand on that, I don't know, I didn't dig it. So the other con that, if you talk to anybody in the DTF business, it's new tech and it's hard to get support. And a lot of these machines are breaking every other day. And it's just, people don't know what they're doing, or people who are manufacturing don't know how to support somebody on site, because again, everybody's environment is different. You may have tons of humidity. I know somebody who's doing this in Florida, and I know someone who's doing this in Las Vegas. And if you think those two environments are, those are like the two most extreme environments you could do this in, there's like no humidity. So having to figure all of that out can be, it's just, you gotta be willing to roll up your sleeves if you're going to do this yourself, or you can do what I do and just outsource it all and just, get it sent to you and use your little heat press. And, I did 400 totes with DTF recently. And I mean, that's a lot of this, on the heat press, but I didn't have to worry about printing them. I got them all sent to me. And because I did such a big quantity, it was like less than 50 cents a print, and they were decent size, so made my tote price really, really inexpensive. But that's DTF. And so for like totes, I love that. And if there's a lot of negative space, I don't even mind it on garments. It's just when it's a big graphic, that's where I'm gonna lean towards DTG every single time, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one on the list, vinyl. Some pros for vinyl: inexpensive to get started, and you can potentially do more than just garments. So again, you can potentially do other things, other like hard goods, right? If you want to do this in-house, well, I guess to give some more context to inexpensive to get started. So if you wanted to do this in-house and outsource it, you've heard of Cricut machines. You can do this. It's basically what they do is a vinyl transfers. And you can do this kind of in-home hobby side hustle kind of. I have a friend actually who lives just probably like 45 seconds that way from me, who is looking at doing this in his house for a brand that he's wanting to start. So it's inexpensive. You can do production in-house and kind of grow from there. Some cons to this would be weeding, and then also weeding. And what do we mean by weeding is, so it's going to print out, the vinyl is going to print out a whole sheet, and you have to go and kind of peel that design out of that
negative
sheet,
space,
and make sure if you're doing letters, you want to make sure that the R, if it's capital R, you got to poke that little section out, or, so that's a labor intensive process, can be, depending on how much you're doing, how many you're doing, what the designs are. Regardless of what you're doing, though, you will have to weed. It's just what it is. Travis, what are some other, when it comes to colors, it can also be a challenge as well.
Yeah, you have to, each sheet that you're going to put in this thing is going to be one color. And so if you want to do a multicolored, garment or multicolor print on the garment, you're going to have to put, multiple colors in, cutting out different pieces. And then you're going to have to line them up on the garment and do this one, and then this one, and then this one. And you got to make sure that they're all lined up. You can screw up your garment pretty easily if you don't line them up. We used to use it for one color stuff. And then the other con is, because each piece is like its own color, you are kind of limited to simple graphics and text. Like I was saying, we just did we would do either white or black, depending on the shirt color, and text. And that's all we did. And it still sucked to weed all that negative space, for all of those text-based garments that we were sending out with vinyl. But again, like you said, could be really advantageous. I feel like it has a similar hand feel to a DTF, and it could be an easy way to, like you say, start small with the brand. And you could you have your little logo there and put it on the hem of a private label yoga pant, and start your own Nike competitor or whatever, Lululemon competitor, because just with a single color logo or something. But because it is so, like, the machine to do it and the materials are so inexpensive, it's pretty easy to get started in your home. The other benefit is that it doesn't matter if it's cotton or poly or whatever, you can put vinyl on pretty much anything. So that's a benefit too.
Yeah. The next one here, as we keep going, sublimation. So is this the number one? Is this the
This is
hand?
number one.
This is the number one. Yeah, I figured
is
when you
number
said
one.
you'll know, I did know then. But here we are. Some pros produces gorgeous full color images. Now, this is also more than just a garment scenario. If you listened a couple of weeks ago,
Yep.
I think, Travis, you referenced when we were at NBM in Portland, we saw that wall art that was, the aluminum, or that's like gloss finish that was just vibrant. It was so beautiful. To your point, gorgeous. And you can use supplement again. You can use a printer to do mugs, which is how we got started. Skinny tumblers, wall art, all kinds of things that you can do, and it's amazing. Such a good quality at the end. However, the cons of this kind of come into play when you're thinking garment-based decoration, because sublimation, really, from a scientific standpoint, you're just dyeing the garments. You're not really printing on top of, you're just dyeing the existing garment.
And that's why the hand is so amazing, because you're not putting a print on top of it. Yeah, you're literally dyeing the fabric, and so you cannot feel the image.
Right.
You just can't, because you're just changing the color of whatever fabric that you're, if you're doing garments, you're just changing the color of the fabric.
Yep. And that's why, again, so this is where, the con of, you can only use light colored fabrics. Same is said for if you're doing mugs. It's a whole different process if you're wanting to sublimate just white ceramic mugs as opposed to a black mug, which are out there. But if you're sublimating that, you have to give account for the fact that you can't really dye a dark color, because the white in the print will be negative space and will take on the color of the garment that you're printing. So if Travis is wearing a black shirt, so if he had a design that had a lot of white in it, the white in the design would then just be black, and it's not going to be the same desired outcome when you're doing sublimation. And conversely, from DTG is cotton dominant, sublimation poly dominant. Poly dominant works the best.
So just to shed a little more light on black mugs, for instance, if you actually had a sublimation printer at your house and you had a mug press and you were going to do black mugs, you would buy black mugs from a supplier, and they would have a black handle and then a black, almost like a rectangle around a white square that you would actually sublimate. You're not going to sublimate the black around the edges and close to the handle and the handle itself. That's going to be black. But that means that you have to match that black. So you're almost always going to see it. If anyone in our audience has ever ordered a black mug, you can go grab it right now, and you can see where the print starts and where it stops, and where the mug, it was actually black before. That was actually a whole big rectangle around the whole thing that was white, that the person, first of all, printed a ton of black ink and then their image inside of it. And if there was any white in the image, it was just left blank in that area because there was a big white area. So you'd press it, and then it would fill in all the black around that would hopefully match the color of the actual black on the mug, because sometimes it would get a little purple, and then the image would have, the negative space would be white, and then it'd have all the beautiful colors of sublimation, just with that black background around it, which, using we use Sawgrass printers, they're a cartridge based system, and so ink can get pretty expensive. So if you're just saturating this thing with black dye to do black mugs, it's why we never got into doing black mugs, to be quite honest. Because but I know we're talking about apparel and doing it on apparel, so it's very similar. You probably don't want to do anything but white garments with sublimation, because that's where you're going to get your truest color. So if, we say light garments, but you put a yellow garment and then you dye, or you sublimate something on it, that blue is going to look a little green. That red is going to look a little orange. I guess,
orange. Yeah,
you get the idea. It's not going to be true to color unless you're starting with that white, polyester,
right?
Onesie or t-shirt or whatever. That's actually, I know I keep talking and we're going long, but sublimate, that's when you're driving down the street and you see that guy, on a 10 speed or a 12, 20 speed or whatever, and he's flying by you and he's got that, brightly colored polyester biking shirt on. That's sublimation. That started white. That started white. They cut it out. They rolled it through a big, massive press that had the transfer on one side and then the garment on the other side. And then they cut it out and they cut both sides out and they sewed it. And that's how they make all that stuff. So you never know. Is there a more thing that we can get really quick? Can you? Thank you. I feel better now.
You're welcome. Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get on the Print on Demand cast.
That vindicates and justifies the knowledge you just dropped, is that additional bumper. Okay. So the next one we're going to touch on is screen print transfers. Now, I've had a lot of experience with this. Travis, you've had a lot of experience with screen print transfers. So the pros, it's a great hand, which again means just a great feel to the finished product, the print and the garment. And if you are looking to start in home, if you want to do some production in house, all you need to really make this happen is the screen print transfers, which there's lots of companies and resources to find very well produced screen print transfers. All you need is a heat press. So you lay the transfer on the garment and then boom, you're there, and it feels great, feels quality. And it can go on all sorts of garments, both
it's like screen printing
and polyester. Yep. It's just like screen printing. So, and we use this a lot. We actually, really leveraged this when it came to sleeve prints for one of our clients, because he was selling enough that we could justify ordering some logos or whatever just to heat press, because sleeve printing on DTG is a whole we talked about recipe books. That's one of those things. It's a whole different workflow. You have to preach it another time. It is a pain for sure. But some cons, again, hard to do photorealistic images, just like that con in the screen printing category. It's transferable because it's the same process, really. You're just getting a transfer version of it. And again, congruently to screen printing, you always have to have a minimum order quantity.
Right. We used to, this is actually a great business if you want to start something out of your house, just having a heat press and then having, some accounts with people who do DTF and they do screen print transfers, because when people would call us, for me, now that I'm at my house, I don't have a DTG machine, so I can't do that stuff. I don't have any screen printing equipment. But when someone calls me and they want an order, I'm going to gauge it on how many colors there are. And if it's not very many colors, I'm going to if it's like a one color, I'm probably going to go with the screen print. Or if it's polyester, well, I guess DTF can do that. But if it's like a full color thing, I'm going to go DTF. And I have both of those options now that you didn't have 5 years ago because DTF didn't even exist. But now there's enough quality people doing it that you can do full color at your house with just a heat press, and then the garments, obviously, that they want them printed on.
Right.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The last one, I guess we're into our honorable mentions.
Yep.
Embroidery gets an honorable mention and just barely.
We weren't sure if we should put this on here because yes, technically it's a garment decoration. I mean, there's also like gemstones you can do, bling and stuff. There's a lot of other things, but I guess, there's, and if you guys know some that we left out and you're like mad, please let us know. Say, hey, we will shout you out and say, you know what, Joseph. Josepher.
That's
Josepher said that this other print method was really important to him, and so let us know. But embroidery.
Also, no. If your name is Josepher, you win something. Just let us know because he made that up on the spot.
We need to edit that out, but we won't. All right.
No, it won't happen.
The pros of embroidery, it ups the perceived value. People think that, an embroidered product costs more. There's an perception that it's worth more. And that's probably because it is. It usually costs a lot more to do an embroidered garment than it would, a simple screen print. It's not just pull your squeegee across a couple of things. There's some stitching that has to go into it, and
yes.
Before you can stitch it, one of the cons is you have to digitize it. And basically you're creating the sew pattern for the needles. And because if you did every single embroidery, just it would look like hot garbage. And so they literally
not even hot garbage, just cold. This is
cold garbage. Yes. And so there are people that are really good at this and they know how to take an image and make it look really nice. And so you can probably have seen it. You've seen cheap embroidery, you've seen good embroidery. But all of that is coming down to the digitization of the file, which costs money. And then the other con, I think Josiah and I both have said this on the show a million times. It's just a pain in the ass.
Emotional damage.
What's your joke you always say about
embroidery almost made me a functional alcoholic. I was, so what for apparel days, quick tangent. Embroidery is always going to be in demand. If you're whether you're doing drop shipping, whether you have your own shop, customers are going to always ask for hats. Businesses are going to want to know if you can do polos. Embroidery is a sought after print method. And so we decided to try and bring it in-house. We bought a used Melco machine, and man, I had that thing locked in. It was great. Came back. I left on a trip or something, came back. Nothing was working the way it was. It was one thing goes wrong, you have like 5 things to check. It's like I hated learning embroidery. It's when I also definitely gained an appreciation for those that do it well and have their machines dialed in, because to know that machine, there's so many. We talked about a recipe book for DTG. There's just so many things you have to know when it comes to embroidery. What could be wrong? Is it the bobbin? Is it the thread itself? Is the needle break? Are you going to change the needle? How many times are you going to poke yourself with the finger and draw blood when you do change the needle? It's the tension of the thread. There's so much to it, which is why when it comes to like a a print on demand model, it's kind of hard because you're going to have to charge accordingly for your time. It's going to take you a lot of time to get that dialed in. Each design is going to take a certain amount of time, a certain amount of thread counts. And so it's certainly not my, like, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, Josiah, listen to the podcast, love the content, whatever. Hey, I need to know, what's your suggested go-to print method for print on demand? It will never be embroidery. That will never be my first recommendation. Someone comes up to me off the street and asks my opinion. But to that end, Travis, I mean, so I'll give mine, but first I'll throw it to you. What would you suggest for print on demand if someone were to say, hey, and this might be two different answers because you might have the drop shipper and then you might have the one who's doing production in-house. But what would you say is the preferred method for print on demand for someone that's coming to us asking for advice?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different scenarios, that people can be in. So many different scenarios. So I think for, just the standard person that's going to they just want to sell t-shirts on Etsy or whatever, or, maybe some hoodies and all that stuff. I think DTG is probably your best bet because A, you don't know how many you're going to sell. And so why print a bunch of them up with screen printing? And then B, I think you're going to have a better hand on the final garment than you would with DTF. So that would be my recommendation there. If you were going to, but that totally depends. Like if you're doing an athleisure line, maybe you don't want to go with DTG. Maybe you do want to go with find people who are doing DTF on polyester, garments and things like that. And then the last kind of scenario I'll tease out at like, maybe you're doing really good on Etsy and you're doing all these, DTG shirts and apparel and all that stuff. And you're like, you know what? I kind of want to do some other things. Maybe I want to bring something in house. I have all these designs I've got on t-shirts. I want to start putting them on coffee mugs, and I want to design for baby onesies. And I want to do, some other things that you can do with a sublimation printer. A sublimation printer, maybe a heat press, like a mug press, maybe a flat press. That might be my preferred method for somebody who wants to dip their toes in the water with their own production, as opposed to buying a $25,000 or $15,000 DTG machine, and then they need a pre-treater and they need a humidifier now, and they also still need a heat press to cure it all. I don't know that I would recommend that if you're trying to start production on your own. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the barrier to entry is so much higher for DTG because you do it, to your point, have to purchase such an expensive piece of machinery. So to that end, and again, to your point, not only is it a printer, but it's the pre-treater, it's the press. And so there's just so many things you have to buy at once to do DTG if you wanted to do production. So yeah, I would say, DTF or screen print transfers, if you're just starting out, something that's a lower barrier to entry, you don't need as much equipment, and it's a proof of concept. If you land on something that's blowing up and you're doing a lot of volume, and then it justifies maybe moving to the DTG or getting a DTG because of maybe you've just hit that vein and you're just having crazy good volume, you can do that. If you're drop shipping, I think if you're drop shipping, DTG is a great way to go because you don't have to incur all of the costs. You don't have to absorb all of that. You can get the photorealistic images, so there's really not a limit to what your customers can do or what you can do in terms of your own designs. When I say customers, I guess if you're doing stuff for other people, there's less of a limitation other than the garment type that they can print on. So DTG is a great way to go. I would just say get samples also to our earlier story, just to know what you are going to be sending out there. So, and that's our initial experience. It would probably change, to Travis's point, if we had a one-on-one consultation with you and you said, I want to outfit the next generation of bicyclists. Well, a DTG is not going to be your way to go. We're going to have other suggestions for you in terms of maybe what you want, how you want to start, and where you want to go. So, but that's kind of, I guess, my first opinion for the two different answers. So, Travis, anything else before we kind of round out this main event and send this one home?
I know we were like, do we need a point of interest? Maybe we'll just skip it this week. And I was like, oh man, this show's going to be really short then. And here we are coming up on an hour. So
shame on us for underestimating our ability to just talk.
Right. Oh no, I think we've said it all. Let's just remind people about the VIP list. If you're not on our VIP list,
for sure.
Let's get them on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's where you go to get on the VIP list: printondemancast.com/VIP. And if you're new to the show, you're wondering, what does that mean? Basically, what it means is you're a part of our group that gets an additional email each and every week on Wednesdays. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to hound you. What it is basically a supplement to the show, but also some additional information that could prove useful, maybe some stuff we don't touch on in the show. But if you want to be fully informed and kind of know everything in the goings on of the print on demand cast universe, this is the list to go on. You'll also get a free design calendar, which kind of helps you chart out exactly what you should be selling design wise, holidays to anticipate. And it's just kind of a resource and a tool to help you be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to the seasonality of the industry and what you should be kind of capitalizing on from a consumer standpoint as well. Travis, anything you want to add to that kind of value add for the VIP list?
I think you forgot that there's a bonus dad joke in every episode or every newsletter.
I did, which is, I mean, I should have led with that. I could have just stopped talking. You know what I mean? Everyone just wants that bonus dad joke. But again, printondemandcast.com/VIP is where you can go to sign up for that. And we're very thankful for you guys for joining us, clicking play, clicking download, whatever you did to get to this episode. We are very grateful for you tuning in. And we look forward to being back here next week to give you a new episode. And again, the craziest review I've ever laid my eyes on. So please come. I mean, and that's saying we had a dog training review earlier where someone was like, you guys are my dog trainers. This is almost more crazier than that. So you're going to want to hear that. And where can you go to find that out? Well, folks, it's the same time, same place each and every week. And until then, for Travis, I'm Josiah. We'll see you right here on the Print on Demand cast.
See ya.
Hey, babe. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Print on Demand cast. We hope you enjoyed the Totally Tubular Show. If you got a question or a suggestion for the show, send Travis and Josiah an email at info@printondemandcast.com. Want to be wicked nice? Take a minute to rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe now so you don't miss next week's episode. See you next time, for sure.